Democracy in Latin America seems to be on life alert. For the last few years, the mixture of corruption, inequality, and now just violence during a pandemic have eroded the democratic institutions in a region that's already been struggling with a democratic identity. Last year, we saw people rise up against the government in Chile, demanding something to be done about inequality. We saw Evo Morales in Bolivia have to step down, and the right-wing party kind of almost forced his party out of office. Last week, I talked about corruption and the recession in Argentina, and obviously people know what's happening in Mexico, Venezuela. It's just not a good time in Latin America, and today I want to talk about Peru. Peru has had their third president in less than a week. And today on this catching up, I just want to do my best to update everyone on this growing chaos inside of Peru, which is actually my favorite country in Latin America. So, what's up everybody? I'm feeling casual today, getting kind of cozy. You can probably kind of see out the window behind me. We have a lot of snow coming down. It's been cold and just wet all day. I bought a sauna because everything's closing with COVID. I got that all put together and set up, and it doesn't work. So I've been on the phone with customer service, so not too thrilled about that. But let's dive into Peru. Get my mind off of that broken sauna. So I want to give a background kind of on what's happening right now because there are so many things to unpack. And like a lot of Latin America, Peru has a very complicated history with authoritarianism, corruption, inequality, and kind of anti-democratic systems that have been trying to, evolve into a democracy. So basically on November 9th, Peru's Congress voted to get rid of President Martin Vizcarra, and this was over corruption. Vizcarra went without any issues, and Manuel Merino, who is the head of Congress and an opponent of Vizcarra, stepped in as president. Following his promotion, the streets of Lima and other big cities in Peru erupted with widespread protests. That's because people were angry. And from what I've gathered, the main reason for these protests was that average citizens were angry over the lack of congressional oversight and deliberation surrounding Merino's promotion to president. This is not the man that people voted for, and Vizcarra was very popular, and a lot of people were questioning, why does Congress have the right to just do this over corruption allegations, not even charges, not something that's been proven yet. And a lot of people felt this was an abuse of congressional power. But yeah, Vizcarra stepped down. But the funny thing is, well, kind of funny, is that Merino actually stepped down a couple days ago as well. So now within the last 5 days, Peru is now on their third president, which is pretty crazy. And unfortunately, this trend isn't really that surprising. Demonstrations sadly have gotten violent as well, and police were forced to use rubber bullets and tear gas in a lot of Peruvian cities. And this led to the death of, I believe, two protesters. And that was kind of the nail in the coffin for Merino's short-lived presidency, which only lasted like 3 days. First off, I'm really not surprised this happened. This man wasn't elected to the position, and he wasn't even backing the administration that was in power. So it's clear that this was just a recipe for disaster, and people are already on edge with COVID, with the economy, just kind of everything that's happening in the world right now. It's really not a surprise that people were mad about this. So first off, I think we need to remember that, quite frankly, Peru does not have a great history of electing ethically great leaders or morally great leaders or really just great leaders in general. As I've said, in the last week, Peru's had 3 presidents. But the crazier thing is that in the last century, multiple Peruvian presidents have ended up in prison or jail. Not like 1 or 2, okay? In 2017, this just explains how bad it is. In 2017, the New York Times released an article that's called, "Does Peru Need a Special Prison Just for Ex-Presidents?" That's not a good look. Not a great look. And according to this article, in quotes here, 4 of its former presidents are in jail or fugitives from justice for human rights crimes or corruption or both. A world record? Probably, but hardly one to celebrate. End quotes. So just to kind of paint a picture of a few of these savory characters, the most recent one, or one of the most recent ones, was Alberto Fujimori. And he was Peru's authoritarian autocratic ruler from 1990 to 2000. And he was sentenced in 2009 to 25 years in jail for human rights violations, kind of around the Shining Path, which was a socialist group in the 90s that was kind of wreaking havoc in Peru. And I'm guessing that Fujimori used extrajudicial means to find out and capture these people and get information. A lot of abuses of human rights, stuff like that. And this was a very dark period of time in Peru. And I guess it makes sense that he was, not doing the most ethically great things during that time. Another former president, Alejandro Toledo, who served from 2001 to 2006, was actually the guy who brought democracy back. And so he's currently living in Palo Alto, California, because he's fighting extradition to Peru. He was part of this Odebrecht scandal, which came out of a Brazilian construction company called Odebrecht. And now I could do an entire episode just on this scandal, the Odebrecht scandal. But just for anyone who knows, this was an unprecedented scandal in terms of the scope. It was almost like there were politicians in a multitude, almost every Latin American country involved in this scandal. And I think it showed the wide scope of corruption in Latin America. And so what happened is in 2017, the Paradise Papers, which were a set of confidential electronic documents relating to offshore investment and basically showing kind of shady corruption, revealed the extent of this scandal involving the payments of bribes in Operation Car Wash to many South American politicians. And basically this just kind of put a spotlight on the fact that politicians don't care about average people and that politicians have been doing a lot of corrupt shit for a long time. That's basically what this showed. But anyways, maybe the most tragic end to a president's career was in 2019, when former Peruvian President Alan Garcia died after shooting himself as police arrived at his home to take him to jail. I mean, I don't mean to laugh. I don't want to sound cold, but this event really does kind of, I think, sum up Peru. Is this guy literally kills himself after he stepped down from office as the police are on their way to take this guy to jail. That's just sadly so fitting for where the country's at. Now I'm just trying to keep this quick, so I'm not going to get into too much more of that, but just know that Peru has a reputation of either autocratic or corrupt leaders, and this Odebrecht scandal in 2017, when it finally came out, just kind of showed that. And these were Argentinian officials, Brazilian officials, Mexican officials. I believe there are even American officials involved in it. I would have to check that, but it's not good. And so I think the most important thing now to talk about is why was the president Vizcarra impeached for corruption last week? And just remember, because I've said so many names now in the last couple of minutes, Vizcarra was the one last week who was impeached by Congress, and the leader of Congress, Merino, who's actually in opposition to him, became president for 3 days and then also stepped down. And so according to the Council on Foreign Relations, Vizcarra was actually one of the most popular leaders in Latin America. His public support was always above 50% in polls, which is good, and he even reached about 90% when dealing with COVID. The problem, though, is that Peru has one of the world's highest COVID deaths per capita, and that's mainly just due to poor healthcare systems, poor public infrastructure, and negligence. And so what's kind of happened now is that Vizcarra's opponents accused him of gross negligence in this crisis. And obviously this crisis is more complicated than one person, especially in a country with such bad public health care. And so his opponents in Congress used the permanent moral incapacity grounds, which are found in Article 113 of Peru's constitution. Now, I'm clearly not an expert on Peruvian constitutional law or just anything about the Peruvian constitution. But from what I've seen, permanent moral incapacity sounds subjective to opinion and likely vulnerable to partisanship. It sounds like something similar to maybe the 25th Amendment in the United States, which is really only subjective, and you don't really want to set the precedent of using it because you know the other party is going to do it. And that's what happened here. Basically, Congress impeached Vizcarra because of allegations of corruption and bribes from when he was the governor of the Department of Moquegua. Vizcarra, who was an engineer, he was also then vice president in 2016, and then became, the governor of this state earlier on. And he actually was the vice president to President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, who resigned amid, guess what, corruption charges. Notice a trend? But now here's the problem, is that polarization has won, and it's probably only going to get worse, because now supporters of Vizcarra are calling foul play, and some are even kind of branding this removal as a political coup. This is because, like I already said, corruption isn't new to Peru at all. And so a lot of people are kind of confused why all of a sudden Vizcarra got impeached for corruption. Because he's not obviously the first president to be involved in corruption. And so, maybe they're just trying to set a precedent and try to, fix corruption. But it more seems like the opposition party is just using these corruption allegations to get rid of him. They're politicizing this Article 113 of the Constitution. And so it's actually interesting because Congress has never actually used corruption to impeach a president. So this is all unprecedented. And now Merino, who was the president for like 3 days before he stepped down a few days ago, he was a conservative and a vocal critic of Vizcarra. And he was actually one of the ones that was attacking Vizcarra's administration and his party in Congress. I kind of see him as somewhat of a, like Lindsey Graham during the Kavanaugh hearings, just this fiery guy who's just like really criticizing the left and the media. Like that was kind of Merino. He was just outspoken against Vizcarra's leading party. And so that's my question is, if so many people are corrupt, why were they focusing on Vizcarra if it wasn't for political means? And this is a staggering number, is that 68 lawmakers in Congress in Peru are currently being investigated for criminal charges of some form or another. So why Vizcarra again? Now, Francisco Sagasti is the third president, and I think it was like 2 days ago where he now got placed into that role. And he's probably not the worst decision. He's a centrist. He's an industrial engineer. He's from Lima, and he actually opposed the impeachment of Vizcarra. And so he's a centrist who maybe thought there was wrongdoing and foul play. So that could be interesting. But he's got a lot of issues going forward. And these are kind of the standard issues, unfortunately, in Latin America. He's going to face a weak party system, pervasive corruption, sharp economic contraction, and COVID. And as I said earlier, I'm just worried about the polarization of Congress, the Constitution, and just the presidency. And I think this could really hurt Peru going forward. Article 113 is now being weaponized against the sitting executive on pretty much flimsy grounds, from what it seems to be. And this just sets a really dangerous precedent that could make it hard for anyone to really get anything done. That's why I hear a lot of people in the United States on the left and the right, they say we really shouldn't enact the 25th Amendment, because then parties of the opposite side are just going to use it for political means. And, as I said at the beginning, Latin American democracy is in crisis. COVID has only made that worse. COVID's kind of put a flashlight on the problems so everyone can see them. Inequality and corruption are key, and I think until they address that, political battles are pointless. So I'm going to leave it with that. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.